Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto was master of the forbidden jutsu Jiongu. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Konoha Hokage Tower 1 week later. Hiruzen sighed as he read another report on the destruction done to the village. Thankfully, the assistance of Kyomo and the Amalja had prevented the damage from becoming too great. Speaking of the Kyomo shinobi, they had departed for home only 2 days ago, needing to return to their own village. I had promised to send some supplies for rebuilding, which Hiruzen was very grateful for. Jiraiya, Hiruzen began, catching the attention of his old student who was just entering the room. Please tell me that there's some good news. Well, the Sonin began. Several buildings have been rebuilt, and with a better structure than before. Whoever did them in the beginning did a half-assed job. I'm surprised that they didn't collapse years ago. The Sandaime grunted in frustration. Another thing I'm going to bring up in the council meeting tomorrow. I swear this invasion revealed more problems within our village than we ever knew about. Look at it this way, Jiraiya began in a jovial tone. Now you can get rid of some idiots without having to give a false reason. Hiruzen shook his head and turned to face his former student. So, have the Toads said anything about that Ifrit character? When I went to the elder Toad sage, he gave me quite a story, Jiraiya began. He said that he is a god created by the desires of the beings who worshipped him, and that there are others like him, each one possessing different powers. What kind of powers? Hiruzen asked. One of them can create hurricanes with a flick of the wrist, another can make a tidal wave with a flick of the tail, and one can even cut down any opponent with a single slash of his sword, Jiraiya explained. These are not beings we should anger in any way, Hiruzen told him. Don't worry, Jiraiya said. Naruto can summon them, meaning that we're safe from getting maimed by them. Speaking of Naruto, Hiruzen began, has Tsunade made any guesses as to when he will awaken? Jiraiya nodded his head. She said that he should wake up either today or tomorrow. Kid really exhausted himself that day. Fighting the unstable Uchiha, taking on an insane Jinchuriki, summoning a deity that no doubt took a toll on his reserves, and merging with said deity to assist me in dealing with Orochimaru, Hiruzen noted. I'm amazed that he managed to last as long as he did. Kid's got an ungodly amount of stamina, Jiraiya reminded him. Hiruzen nodded in agreement as he continued to look through reports. Konoha General Hospital. The entire hospital was busier than normally, with all of the victims of the invasion having been brought in. Thankfully, with Tsunade around, healing the injured was a faster process than how it would be otherwise. The Amalja were a godsend as well, with their healers being able to instantly heal those who had cuts, bruises, or other injuries on their skin. Unfortunately, their magic was unable to properly heal broken bones and other internal injuries, which was evident when Tsunade had to re-break a Chunin's bone and heal it a different way. While this was going on at the lower floors of the hospital, more important events were happening on the upper floors, specifically in one room. Naruto Uzumaki lay asleep in a hospital bed. His sister Natsumi lay asleep with her head resting on the side of the bed, tightly grasping her brother's hand. His hearts were released and at different parts of the room. The new hearts added to Naruto's arsenal were perched outside the window, Fox lay underneath the bed, Titan stood in the corner of the room, and Crab had scuttled his was onto the ceiling. Shredder was still sealed up in his scroll, as only Naruto could release him. The door opened and Kushina walked inside. She completely broke down when she first saw her firstborn in a hospital bed days ago, and while she had grown stronger emotionally, it still hurt her to see it. She looked towards her daughter and smiled warmly, seeing how much Natsumi cared for Naruto. She walked over to Natsumi and softly shook her shoulder. The young girl groggily woke up and rubbed her sleepy eyes as she looked around, her eyes settling on her mother. Ka-chan? Natsumi sleepily asked. Natsumi, do you want something to eat? Kushina asked softly. The youngest Uzumaki nodded and laid her head back down on the bed before grasping Naruto's hand again. Kushina walked over to the head of the bed and brushed back Naruto's hair before planting a soft kiss on his forehead. Please wake up soon, she pleaded before leaving the room. Mindscape. Kurama sighed once more as he glanced at his snout. Laying down in a lifeless heap was one Naruto Uzumaki. The young boy had fallen unconscious in his mind as well, and for good reason. The entire day had taken an absolute monster of a toll on his body, not to mention the sudden entrance and exit of Ifrit's essence straining his chakra. When do you suppose he will wake up? Jiyu asked. It's been quite a while, so it could be either today or tomorrow, Kurama answered. But based on his chakra activity, I'd say today. Chakra activity? Jiyu wondered. Are you familiar with brain activity? When Jiyu nodded, the bijou continued. It's similar to that, only it can be a sign of the person being awake or asleep. While your brain will be active either way, your chakra will settle down the less active you are. A good sensor can use this to avoid ploys by the opponent or enemy ambushes. How do you know all this? Jiyu asked. I've been sealed inside of 3 hosts. I've had all the time in the world to observe the human body and how it works. You can see how bored I was. Kurama then returned his gaze to his snout and said, oh look, he's starting to wake up. And just like that, Naruto's body vanished from his mindscape. Kurama let out a sigh and said, of course, he would wake up on the outside first. Outside? Naruto felt strange, he felt really tired, yet felt the need to wake up. How strange was that? Nevertheless, he pushed himself to wake up, his mind wading through the haze that enshrouded his conscious thoughts. Tired eyes slowly opened, looking up at a white ceiling. I'm inside. But inside where? He wondered as his eyes looked from side to side. He noted Crab on the ceiling, and Titan standing in the corner. He saw a crimson wing on one side of the window, much to his confusion as he knew of no bird like that native to Konoha. Absently noting that his hand felt warm, he looked over and saw his little sister asleep on the side of his bed, his right hand being grabbed by her own smaller one. He smiled to himself and rubbed the back of her hand with his thumb. Ni-chan. Natsumi mumbled as her grip got a little tighter. I'm right here, Natsumi, Naruto said, causing the young girl to stir a little. She slowly cracked an eye open and saw Naruto smiling at her, causing her young mind to quickly process the information she was seeing. Ni-chan. Natsumi cried as she shot awake. Good morn, wo. Naruto cried as he was suddenly grabbed into a tight hug. Ni-chan. Ni-chan. You're awake. Natsumi cried out. Naruto noted that his hospital gown was getting wet, and he realized that she was crying. I tried to wake you up, but you didn't. I thought that you would stay asleep forever. I didn't want to lose my Ni-chan. Wah! Naruto was both happy and guilty. He was happy that she was worried about him, as it showed how close the both of them had gotten, bringing him closer to his dream of having a family. The guilt obviously came from being the cause of her worry, and causing her to cry. So he did what any other big brother would do, he pulled her into a hug and let her cry out her tears of joy. Natsumi. I heard you crying, what's going on? Kushina shouted as she kicked the door out the window and burst into the room with her sword drawn. No, really, she literally kicked the door so hard that it flew off its hinges and out the window. Kushina looked around for any sort of threat, absently noting that Titan was still standing there and not responding to anything. She looked around again before her eyes landed on her now awake son who was holding his sister in a tight embrace. Ka-chan, Ka-chan. Ni-chan's awake. Natsumi cried as she tried to hold on to Naruto in a tighter hold. Kushina dropped her sword and raced to Naruto before grabbing both of them in a hug of her own. You baka! What were you thinking? Making me worry so much. Kushina scolded, trying to sound angry. But the tears falling from her eyes and the quiver in her voice ruined that effect. Naruto felt another wave of guilt wash over him as he saw his mother in such a state. He pulled both of them into a family hug as they let out tears of joy at his recovery. So the Uzumaki family spent the next hour in this state, not caring about anything else in the world. Later. Naruto-kun, Kushina began after she had composed herself, what was that creature you summoned a week ago? Naruto sighed, knowing that this question would come up many times from now on. His name is Ifrit, he's the lord of the inferno and god to the beast men known as the Amaljae. So you summoned a kami? Kushina asked, with wide eyes. Naruto shook his head. Not a kami, but a kind of lesser deity. Ifrit only has control over all kinds of fire, nothing more. There are other kinds like him, each having control over a specific power or element. I see, Kushina nodded. How many other deities are there then? They go by several names, but are commonly known as primals, Naruto informed her, and there are about 14 of them. Wow, Kushina gasped, not expecting there to be that much. Oh! You're awake. Everyone looked over to see Shizune at the doorway, or what was left of it anyway. Shizune-chan. Look! Ni-chan's awake. Natsumi informed the apprentice of Tsunade. That's great, I'll go inform Tsunade-sama right away. Shizune said as she turned around. By the way, what happened to the door? And the window? Kushina's face turned red as she began to come up with some kind of excuse. Ka-chan kicked the door through the window when I cried that Ni-chan woke up. Isn't she super strong? Natsumi told Shizune with a smile on her face. Kushina turned to her with a betrayed look on her face, and Naruto had to use all of his willpower to not burst out laughing. Shizune nodded and produced a smile that gave Kushina some form of worry. Yes, she is strong, and I'm sure that she will also be able to pay for both a new door and window, right Kushina-san? Yes, I'll be able to replace them, Kushina shakily answered. Who was he kidding, she was flat out broke. Wonderful! Shizune exclaimed before leaving. Kushina just sat in her chair and began to think of a way to produce the money necessary. Why does Ka-chan look like that? Natsumi asked. She's, thinking really hard right now. Naruto answered quickly. Okay. Natsumi replied before she went back to snuggling with her brother. Naruto just sighed and laid his head back. Later. Tsunade had come in and, after chewing out Kushina for breaking hospital property, gave Naruto a checkup. She had ordered him to not train for the next week in order for his body to completely recover. It would have been longer, but his Uzumaki genes had shortened his recovery time by a lot. So Gaki, Tsunade began, what's it feel like to summon a thing like that Ifrit guy? Exhausting, Naruto told her. Summoning him took out a chunk of my chakra, it didn't help that I had already fought Sasuke Tame and Gaara before I summoned him. Look on the bright side, at least you didn't completely faint after bringing him out, Tsunade told him. Naruto nodded in agreement. If I'm that tired after summoning Ifrit, then I'll be even worse if I bring out any of the others, Naruto noted. Which is why I'm going to push you hard enough to raise your chakra levels to a high enough level that you'll be able to summon 2 of them. Everyone looked towards the window and saw Jiraiya kneeling on the windowsill. Tsunade scowled and threw an 4 stand at him, which he dodged. Baka! Use the door like a normal human being, she shouted at him. But I'm not a normal human being. Jiraiya argued. I am the glorious Jiraiya-sama. Great Toad summoner and wooer of all women. He then struck a ridiculous pose while summoning a toad to be his stand. Said Toad looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Don't stand on that poor froggy, you meanie. Natsumi yelled as she chucked an apple at Jiraiya, nailing him in the mouth and knocking him off of the toad, who gave Natsumi a grateful look before heading home. Jiraiya sat up and shook his head before yanking the apple out of his mouth. Kid's got a mean throwing arm, he mumbled before getting up. So Gaki, Jiraiya began, how are you feeling? I'm good, the young Uzumaki replied. Good enough to attend a council meeting if you have to? Jiraiya asked. Naruto just gave him a puzzling look. Why? He asked. Jiraiya said nothing and took out a folded piece of paper before handing it to Naruto. He took the paper and unfolded it to see that it was a note. Dear Naruto. If you are reading this then you are awake, which I am very happy for your recovery. I'd like to thank you for your assist in fending off Orochimaru and the reincarnated Hokage. That being said, I have a favor to ask of you. I'd like for you to attend the upcoming council meeting. Everyone will want answers as to who Ifrit is and what his followers are. And seeing how you are the only one who can summon him, you're the only one who can get him to appear to answer our questions. In case you're wondering, he already said that you can summon him to answer our questions. On another note, I will also be revealing Kushina and Natsume's existence to the council. I believe that it is time to remind everyone of the Uzumaki clan and show that they are still alive. From the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto put down the letter and let out a sigh. Well? Jiraiya asked. Might as well go and save the old man some grief, Naruto replied. Jiraiya grinned and shook his head at the exasperated response. So he's going to reveal us to the village? Kushina asked as she looked at the letter. Jiraiya nodded. Yes, he believes that the presence of the Uzumaki in the village will both raise morale and make enemies think twice about attacking us again. Everyone does remember how devastating the Uzumaki's last stand in Yuzu was. Will I be able to summon Ifrit if I have to? Naruto asked Tsunade. The Senju put her hand on her chin in thought and answered, yes, as long as Kushina donates the necessary chakra needed to help with the summoning. Doing it on your own in your state may knock you out again. I can do that, I've got a lot of chakra, Kushina pitched in. Okay, I'll go tell Sensei to make some space in the council chambers tomorrow, Jiraiya said as he leapt onto the windowsill. And to crank up the AC, he added as an afterthought before leaping away. Council chambers next day. Now that we're all here, we can begin, Hiruzen said as he took his seat at the head of the table. The table was a U-shaped table, with each side being used for either the shinobi side, or the civilian side. Hiruzen had this type of table made after receiving confirmation that Naruto would summon Ifrit. On Hiruzen's right was Shikaka Nara, as he was a Jonin commander of Konoha's forces. Following him was Hayashi Hyuga, who maintained the relations between their allies. Tsunade was next as both the Senju representative and head of the hospital. After her was both Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Marino, the heads of the TNI department. Tsume Inuzuka and Choza Akimichi, the one in charge of the distribution of foods throughout the village, were the next ones, and Unkai Kurama, current head of the Kurama clan, sat at the end. Starting from his left was his advisors, Koharu Yudatane and Hamura Mitokado, his former teammates from his days before he was Hokage. Following them were various civilians who were in charge of different parts of the village, construction, business, and several other things. At the end of that section of the table was Donzo Shimura, Hiruzen's rival and head of Root. Not that many knew about that last part though. I'd like to start this meeting with the reports I've gotten on the rebuilding and recovery of the sections of the village that were damaged by the invasions, Hiruzen began as he pulled out a stack of papers. First and foremost, most of the debris has been cleared away, and the reconstruction of several buildings has begun, Hiruzen read off. Some buildings that were heavily damaged have been demolished, as they need to be rebuilt. I'd also like to note that investigations on several buildings have revealed that they were in need of being renovated long ago. Can you please explain this, Akiyama-san? The head of construction looked confused at the news and looked at the copy of the report he had gotten. Strange, I had received word that some of these buildings were already refurbished. Others I didn't even know required any repairs. Perhaps you have some lazy workers in your service, a fat merchant sneered. This is what happens when you hire former convicts instead of honest workers. Akiyama scowled and replied, most honest workers have never picked up a hammer in their life, while the former convicts have been made to work, meaning that they know their way around construction. Enough, Hiruzen spoke loudly, making the two cease their bickering. Akiyama-san, I will have this matter looked into eventually, now let's move on. The second order of business is the prisoners of Suna and Oto. Inoichi, Ibiki, what do you have to report? Hiruzen asked. After having both myself and my clansmen scan the minds of the Suna shinobi, I can say that they received their orders from the Kazekage, Inoichi began. They were under the belief that by knocking us down a peg, they would be able to receive more missions and recover their money. Indeed, Ibiki added, records show that the Wind Daimyo has been sending us missions that should be going to Sunagakure, ruining their economy in the process. We've also received word from Suna that they've discovered the body of their own Kazekage, and that he had been dead for almost 2 months, Hiruzen decided to add. How do we know that they're not lying? Tsume asked. I had Jiraiya investigate for me, Hiruzen reassured her. His agents have confirmed that the information Suna sent us is indeed correct. What does it matter if they were deceived? Unkai sneered. They still attacked us, we should still demand some form of payment for what they did. And we shall, Hiruzen told him. However, the demand that we make should be lessened, as the blame solely rests on Orochimaru. Unkai grumbled, but said no more. The third piece that I would like to address is the Chunin exam candidates that the Raikage and myself have decided to become Chunin. Hokage-sama, Koharu said, gaining his attention, I believe that we should forego the promotions, as the exams were interrupted by the invasion. Hiruzen shook his head. I disagree, all of the candidates had fought their matches, so the Raikage and I managed to come decide upon who should be promoted to the rank of Chunin. Now then, starting from Kyumo, Yujito Ni has been promoted due to her high ability in Katan Jutsu, and on her overall skills in combat. Her endurance to the explosion that her opponent Fug made also impressed us, Hiruzen began. As for Fu of Taki, she has not been given permission from her village to receive a promotion, despite our attempts to communicate with them, so we were unable to give her any votes. At a later date, I would like to speak with Shikaku about this. Said Nara, gave the Hokage a lazy nod. The Raikage and I are withholding our decision on what to do with Suna's candidates until a later date, Hiruzen began before he was interrupted. None of their shinobi should be promoted, the same fat merchant from before said. In fact, they should be made into our slaves as punishment for their invasion. Tetsuo-san, Hiruzen began in a hardened tone, need I remind you that the decision of promoting Genin to Chunin during the exams rests solely on the Kages? And on a further note, slavery is a barbaric thing that has been banned ever since the age when there were no hidden villages. To hear you speak of such a thing can cause bad things to happen. Make sure that I hear nothing more of it. Seeing that the merchant was properly cowed, Hiruzen continued. Now I shall announce the candidates who were promoted to Chunin from Konoha. First is Hinata Hyuga, who impressed both myself and the Raikage with her skill in her mother's unique version of the Juken. Her application of the style into traditional Hyuga techniques, turning them into a more unique and deadly version, shows how much she has grown, and her potential. Hayashi felt the pride within him swell at hearing that her daughter was strong. Yet it also brought forth a fear that he realized that she would now be sent on more dangerous missions, a fear he quickly squashed. What of Niji Hyuga, the prodigy of his clan? Hamura asked. He has not been granted a promotion, as he is obsessed with fate, something that can be harming on a mission, as he may believe that a mission was fated to fail, and abandon it without a second thought, Hiruzen explained. Next is Shino Aburame, who displayed a high degree of skill in both his clan's Kekkei Genkai and Kenjutsu. He also showed that he possesses a high IQ, being able to notice a flaw in his opponent's weapon, and exploiting it to his advantage. Also to mention is his endurance, as he was able to withstand the pain of losing so many Kikeichu during his last match. Next is Shikamaru Nara, Hiruzen began. Pardon me Hokage-sama, but I have something to say about that boy, Hamura started. I do not believe that he possesses the requirements to become a Chunin. He may have an impressive amount of intelligence, as he seemed to plan out his entire match, but he has no will to do anything outside of sleeping. Such behavior is not becoming of a Chunin. I understand your concerns, and I have already spoken to Shikaku about his son, Hiruzen told him. We decided that Shikamaru will be kept under watch to see how he performs his duties. Depending on his performance, he will either keep his rank or be demoted back to Genin. Moving on, we have our last candidate, Naruto Uzumaki. Once again, Hiruzen was interrupted, only this time it was from a complete outburst of stupidity. That demon doesn't deserve to be promoted. He almost crippled Sasuke-kun. He should surrender his powers to Sasuke, someone who would use it for the benefit of the village. Enough! Hiruzen roared as he slammed his hand into the table, creating a large crack in it. You are councilmen, act like it. We are not children on a playground. Looking around, he saw that the civilian side, with the exception of a very small number, including his former team, was effectively cowed into silence. He saw that the shinobi side had pleased looks on their faces as he got the civilians to shut up. Now then, as I was saying, Naruto Uzumaki has been granted the rank of Chunin by both myself and the Raikage. We were both impressed by the abilities he showed in his matches, and how he was able to keep up with Gaara Sabaku, who was not only Suna's Jinchuriki but also their top genin. His Jiongu allows him to perform incredible feats that will prove to be valuable to the village in the future. He almost killed a fellow member of the village. An important one too. Someone shouted. If you're referring to the Rasengan that he used, then he only used it in response to Sasuke's Chidori, Hiruzen replied calmly. I would like to request that his sensei Kakashi be questioned for teaching a genin, a mentally unstable one at that, such a jutsu. Hayashi spoke up. You Hyuga! How dare you call our precious Uchiha-sama unstable? Mabuki Haruno screeched. I am merely stating a fact, is that not correct Hokage-sama? Hayashi asked, never losing his emotionless mask. Indeed, the Raikage and I decided not to grant Sasuke the rank of Chunin due to his obsession with power and revenge, both of which are very unbecoming of a Chunin. I would also point out that he willingly used the cursed seal that was put on him by Orochimaru, despite warnings that he would be denied the rank of Chunin if he did so, Hiruzen spoke. Only because the Uzumaki boy enraged him with the unveiling of his theft of the Uchiha clan's blessed eyes, Koharu butt in. Hayashi managed to control his irritation to the point where his eyebrows slightly twitched. A theft that was done in self-defense, the Sandaime began. I would like to inform you all that some years ago, an Uchiha had died inside the village, an Uchiha who had kidnapped Naruto and attempted to kill him. Naruto's Jiongu reacted on instinct and stole the Uchiha's heart in the process. Preposterous, there's no way a member of such a respected clan would do an act so vile, Hamura argued. I have a written report from both Tsunade, who examined the body, and Inoichi, who had looked into Naruto's mind to see what happened, Hiruzen told him. Everyone looked at Tsunade and Inoichi, who nodded in confirmation. Now then, with the Chunin exams out of the way, I'd like to move on to the next part of this meeting, Hiruzen began, a hidden smirk on his face. I am pleased to announce that there is a new member joining the Shinobi Council. Those who were left in the dark, meaning everyone but Hayashi and Tsunade, were confused as to who would become a part of the council. Allow me to welcome our new member, Kushina Uzumaki. Hiruzen announced, much to everyone's shock, as the doors opened and the redhead entered the room. She was dressed in her jonin outfit but let her hair loose. A chair was placed between Tsunade and Hiyase for Kushina, which she took after giving her fellow shinobi council members a respectful bow. Hiruzen! What is the meaning of this? Koharu shouted, causing the Hokage's eyebrow to twitch at the improper use of his name. Indeed, Kushina Uzumaki died in the Kyubi attack, Hamura pointed out. So this is obviously an imposter. If you would both shut up for a moment, he can tell you the truth of what happened, Kushina spoke up. How dare you speak to us in such a manner? Koharu exclaimed. No, Kushina began, standing up, how dare you make demands of your Hokage and not give him a chance to explain anything? Silence! Hiruzen shouted, using chakra to enhance his voice, much to Tsume's pain. Koharu, Hamura, both of you be silent and listen. And Kushina, while I thank you for defending me, please allow me to handle such situations. Now then, as I was going to explain, I had lied to you all when I said that Kushina Uzumaki had died in the attack, Hiruzen began. There were wounds on her body when we found her, wounds that did not come from the Kyubi, but from a person. So I had her placed in the hospital in a secluded part, and made Jiraiya bring Tsunade back to take over her healing. Of course, this was not the true story. But Hiruzen was forced to improvise, as after the Anbu team that brought Kushina and Natsumi back to the village went back to the root facility, they had discovered that it had collapsed. So without any evidence, Danzo had managed to slip out of trouble this time. But Hiruzen would keep a very close eye on his former teammate, making sure to strike the moment Danzo slipped up. Injuries made from a person? Who was it? Choza asked. A man with a mask. He appeared and ripped the kyubi out of me, Kushina answered. What do you mean, ripped the kyubi out of you? Tsume asked. I was the kyubi Jinchuriki before Naruto, Kushina answered as if she was talking about the weather. What? Was the response from most of the people there. She's been tainted by the demon. Lock her away quickly. Demon whore. Kushina turned to the one who made that last comment and asked, so you're going to call Mito Uzumaki Senju a demon whore as well? What do you mean? Unkai demanded. What I mean is that Mito-sama was the kyubi Jinchuriki before me, the first one at that, Kushina told him. If you're going to insult me, then you're insulting her by extension as she entrusted me with the duty of keeping him contained. The council was silent at this revelation, most of them remembering the stories of Mito. An Uzumaki who was highly skilled in Fuinjutsu, and the one who created the detection barrier that surrounds Konoha. Not to mention one of the most beautiful women of her time. What is your relation to the kyubi Jinchuriki? Danzo spoke up, gaining everyone's attention. Kushina looked at Hiruzen, who only gave her a slight nod. He's my son, Kushina answered, much to the shock of most of the council. When a female Jinchuriki gives birth, the seal holding the bijou weakens. The yandere was in charge of keeping the seal secure while I gave birth in a secluded area. A masked man appeared and took Naruto hostage, forcing Minato to save him while the masked man took me away. He then proceeded to rip out the kyubi from me and send it on a rampage through Konoha. It was decided that she wouldn't mention that the masked man had a Sharingan, as it would cause an uproar among the council. And with how secretive some of them could be, mainly the civilians, the entire village would know in a week, at the most. There was much confusion among the council, many finding the truth to be very shocking. And how could they not? They were just told that the kyubi had been within their village for their entire lives, and that it was through the machinations of a madman that their village was ravaged. Now for the last piece of this meeting, I shall be calling upon Naruto Uzumaki to enter, Hiruzen said as he nodded to the two Anbu at the door. They opened the door and the young Jinchuriki entered. Following him was Kamichika, the chieftain of the Amaljae. Kamichika, Ibiki spoke up as he recognized the leader. I'm surprised to see you here. For the events that will be following, it is only right that I be present for the proceedings that will follow. Who are you? Koharu demanded. I am Kamichika, chieftain of the Amaljae, the Beastman replied. My people have been asked by both Lord Ifrit and Summoner Naruto to assist your village in its recovery. And I thank you for your assistance, it has made things go easier than I thought they would, Hiruzen bowed. There is no need for thanks, I have merely done what any other ally would do, the chieftain told him. Why have you brought this boy here, Hokage-sama? Hamura asked. Many of you have questions about the being that Naruto summoned to battle the Ichibi, Hiruzen began. I have asked Naruto to come here and summon that being so that we might put our curiosity and caution to rest. Kushina stood up and walked behind Naruto, who was standing in the center of the room, placing a hand on his shoulder and channeling chakra into him. Naruto weaved the necessary hand seals and slammed his hands on the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu, Lord of the Inferno. Smoke erupted from the ground, and the heat in the room rose to a great amount, causing everyone to start sweating. The smoke cleared away to reveal the primal in the center of the room, his red eyes scanning over the room's occupants and a low growl reverberating from his throat. O mighty Ifrit, Lord of the Inferno and Champion of the Sun, thy humble servant is not blessed to be in your presence, Kamichika prayed as he kneeled on the floor. Arise, proud chieftain, your faith has blessed you, Ifrit said as he stretched a claw out to the kneeling beastman. He then turned to the Hokage and asked, I assume you have questions? Correct, Hiruzen nodded. The first question that I assume is on everyone's minds is, what are you? Ifrit nodded and began, I am a primal, a god created from the collection of both the faith of my followers and an abundance of ether. What is this ether you speak of? Shikaku asked. Ether is the life force of the world, Ifrit explained. It has changed throughout the times, but I can still taste it in the air around us. It has notably become much more abundant, blanketing the world. All of the primals are made from a collection of ether, much like how the bijou are collections of chakra. So you are a collection of nature energy, Hiruzen mused. It sounds like this ether and nature energy may be the same thing. I know not what nature energy is, so I cannot make any comparisons to them, Ifrit told him. Is ether what you used for that green flame you used on Orochimaru? Tsunade asked. Correct, I infused corrupted ether into the flames before unleashing them at the snake, Ifrit explained. The corrupted ether had entered his arms and destroyed the chakra pathways, preventing him from using any jutsu. And the ether has nearly destroyed his arms themselves. Why not just use the flames on his whole body? Tsunade asked. That would have just killed him. Unfortunately, I could not channel much corrupted ether through Naruto's body, or else I would have caused him damage. Thus, I had to channel a smaller quantity of corrupted ether, and aimed it at the snake's head, which he blocked with his arms. Why not leave Naruto's body and use the flames yourself? Hiruzen asked. He would have been a target, his unconscious state would have made him a liability. And I would not have had enough energy myself upon leaving his body. Why should we listen to the words of a demon? Especially one summoned by the demon brat, a stupid civilian sneered. Hiruzen sent a harsh glare towards the idiot, and Kushina slowly turned to him with a blank look on her face as her hair rose into 9 tails. But that wasn't the most terrifying thing done. Ifrit turned his body and faced the civilian, who was close to fainting at that point. He stalked forward and got his face close to the civilian. The heat coming off of the primal was causing his clothes to become covered in sweat, and it almost looked like he was going to burst into flames. Ignorant mortal! You know nothing of the workings of this world. If I were allowed, I would melt the flesh off your bones and banish your soul into the inferno for all of eternity. Ifrit roared. The council member let out a pathetic squeak before he fell into a dead faint. The Lord of the Inferno let out a pleased growl and backed off. Anbu, please escort that man out of the chambers, Hiruzen commanded before a peculiar smell entered his nostrils. And get some air freshener as well. After the councilman was taken away, Ifrit faced the Hokage once more. You should keep a better counsel, such insolence is insulting. Were it one of the others, they would have killed him where he stood. I apologize for that foolish man's outburst, Hiruzen apologized. And I assure you that it won't happen again. Correct? He finished with an angry glare at the civilian council, who nodded swiftly. Now that that's been taken care of, I believe that we have more questions, Hiruzen began. At Ifrit's nod, he continued. I would like to know about where you and your brethren come from. Ifrit gained a distant look in his eyes. Before beginning, this world was not always inhabited by humans. Eons ago, the world was known as Hydealin and contained the continents of Mericidia, Othard, Ilsabard, and Eorzea. The land of Eorzea was where many events, both good and bad, occurred. Most primals were created in that land, with only one being known to be born from Mericidia. Eorzea was a land composed of the cities of Ulda, Limsa Lominsa, Gridania, Ala Migo and Ishgard. Eorzea was inhabited by people known as adventurers. You could say that they were mercenaries, honorable mercenaries. Adventurers would learn a fighting art from a specific guild, whether they be gladiators, marauders, archers, or conjurers, they all sought out similar work. If they possessed a high amount of skill, then they would learn more ancient fighting styles, such as the warrior, the summoner, the dark knight, or the dragoon. As for us primals, we were sealed away beneath Silvertear Lake for the safety of the realm. Sealed away? Why? Shikaku asked. Primals feed upon ether, we gorged ourselves upon it, bringing a danger to the realm and bringing it closer to ruin. We were sealed away in order to sate our desire so that we may be a part of the world without endangering it. But I assume that you were released early? Hiruzen implied. Correct, when the Garlean Empire began their march upon Eorzea after claiming Ala Migo, They sent a massive air fleet over Silvertear Lake to take the growing settlement of Mordona. However, they were met by a host of dragons, and at the heart flew the father of dragons, and king of kings, Midgardsorm. Dragons? What rubbish, Danzo sneered. This creature is playing us for fools with these lies. Believe what you will, for I speak only the truth, Ifrit told him. During the battle, Midgardsorm wrapped around the flagship and dragged it to the earth. However, the ship exploded and killed the Lord of Wyrms, and also destroying the seal on the lake, releasing us into the world for our beastmen worshippers to summon once more. What had become of your world? Hayashi asked. Gone, ruined to the ravages of time and catastrophe, Ifrit explained. It is apparent that only humans managed to survive, resulting in this world today. As for us primals, we were sealed away inside a separate realm along with most of our worshippers. We would have torn ourselves apart, had the Arbiter not forced us to make peace for our own survival. We made our prison into our new home, and eventually, were called upon to assist the Rikudu Sennin. That is quite a history, I'm having a hard time believing it myself, Hiruzen said. Everyone in the room, sans Naruto, agreed with that statement. But how do we know it is true? Tsume asked. I'm not doubting his word, but I'd like to see some proof. And what kind of proof do you think would be acceptable? Ifrit asked her. The teachings you spoke of, Danzo spoke up instantly. No, those are to be taught to the worthy, Ifrit told him. Konoha is worthy, Danzo pressed. Ifrit glared at him and growled, I have not deemed it so, and the decision is not mine alone. Danzo stared at the Lord of the Inferno for a second longer before backing off. Ifrit then turned to the rest of the council and said, I may not be able to provide proof, but there are other ways to convince you that my words are true. That, I can assure you. I thank you Lord Ifrit, your tales of the distant past have been very entertaining, Hiruzen began. And your explanation of you and your kind has laid many of the questions in my mind to rest. Hiruzen bowed before the primal, and the shinobi council followed suit. The civilian council remained in their seats, but nobody really cared. I move forward the motion that Sasuke Uchiha be allowed to sign the summoning contract, Mabuki spoke up suddenly. Hiruzen groaned and wanted to do nothing more than bash his head into the table for the stupidity he heard. No, Ifrit said. What do you mean, no? He's a much more worthy summoner than that boy, Mabuki spat as she glared at Naruto, who just gave her a bored look. There can only be one summoner, and Naruto has been chosen by myself and the other primals, even that high and mighty God King, Ifrit told her. That's only because you lot have not met Sasuke-kun, another councilman said. That is not the case, Ifrit said. The Rikudu Sennin said that there would only be one to open the summoning contract he created for us, one who possessed the right requirements. Requirements that Naruto possesses, meaning that your Uchiha is unworthy. How dare you claim our precious Sasuke-kun unworthy, you foul beast? We should have you killed for such heresy. Surrender to Sasuke-kun. Enough! Hiruzen roared as he slammed his fist into the table, pulverizing it. I have had enough of your foolies, Yuhes. One more word out of any of you, and I will have you executed on the spot. Do you understand? Most of the Civiline Council cowered in their seats. Hamura and Koharu were close to fainting, only their shinobi nerves were able to keep them conscious. Danzo frowned seeing that his rival had gained in strength. Impressive, such ferocity and strength would gain you the respect of two of my brethren, Ifrit remarked. Once again, I apologize for their insolence, Hiruzen said to the primal. And I thank you for answering our question, Lord Ifrit. Ifrit nodded and said, the next primal you meet shall not be me. I can see that the next time a primal is needed, I will not be ideal for the battle. With that, the primal vanished in a burst of flame. Hiruzen then stood up and cleared his throat. With that, I'd like to end this meeting, you may all return to your duties in the village, he told everyone. He then faced the civilian side and gave them a look that said, say something, I dare you. The civilian council practically raced out of the room, much to the shinobi's amusement. The other half of the council bowed respectively to the Hokage before calmly walking out of the room, leaving only Hiruzen, Naruto, and Kushina. "So Gigi, what now?" Naruto asked. "I believe that you should go and see your team, let them know that you're awake," Hiruzen told him. "Especially a certain Hyuga heiress who was visiting you almost every day." Naruto turned a little red before trying to exit quickly. But Kushina quickly grabbed him and began to squeeze the life out of him. "Oh! My baby's growing up so fast. He's already going to have his first date," she squealed. "How did you know?" Naruto shouted nervously. "I'm supposed to know things like this. Did you honestly think that I didn't notice what you were doing when the invasion began?" Kushina asked him before squeezing even tighter. "Kakaen." Naruto whined as he tried to get away. Hiruzen just burst out laughing at the family before him. Elsewhere. "Arg!" Orochimaru howled in pain as he gripped his arms in a desire to dull the pain, only making it worse. "Damn them! Damn them all!" he roared. Kabuto sighed as he finished his diagnostic of his master's limbs. The constant moaning was starting to get on his nerves. "It's no use, Orochimaru-sama, your chakra pathways have been practically destroyed, and your arms themselves are almost dead," Kabuto told him. "Well, find a way to fix it," Orochimaru ordered. "I don't possess the medical skill required to do so, only your former teammate Tsunade does, and she's a part of Konoha again," Kabuto explained. The Rouge Sannin snarled with unrestrained fury as he looked down at his arms. The skin had turned into a disgusting mixture of a sickly green and purple, and the arms were beginning to look like they were deformed. And that was only the surface, the insides were probably much worse. "Do we not have anything to fix this?" Orochimaru demanded. "Not that I know of, but I'll begin looking for a solution right away," Kabuto told his master before leaving, letting the Sannin suffer alone. Unknown. "The time has come to begin our search," a figure who looked to be made of static stated. He was in a dark cave along with 8 other figures, only 2 of them looking normal. "So, who's first?" a figure with green eyes asked in a deep tone. "We shall begin by observing our targets before we begin plans to capture them," the apparent leader declared. "Hopefully they'll be with some fodder that I can slaughter," a figure with purple eyes and a scythe on his back gleefully shouted. "You and your ridiculous religion," the green eyes figure sighed, gaining the ire of the other man. "Enough," the leader ordered, stopping the argument before it could begin. "You two can bicker on your own time, for now, focus." "What is the status of Konoha?" he asked, turning to the 2 solid figures. "They're wounded, but still active," one of them said in a monotone voice. "But they won't be able to detect us slip in." "Then go and observe the Kyubi Jinchuriki, and if possible, capture him," the leader ordered. The 2 nodded and the figures faded from their view. "So, looking forward to returning to your old home again, Itachi-san?" the larger figure asked as he hefted a large object onto his back. "I've never cared for the village Kisame, but I am interested in seeing how much things have changed," Itachi Uchiha told him as he opened his eyes, his 3-tomoed Sharingan spinning hypnotically as he walked forward and exited the cave. Konoha Uzumaki residence. Naruto let out a snort as he was roused from his slumber. He looked around and saw that he was in a completely different room. His mind woke up a moment later, and reminded him that this was his new room of his new home. Indeed, now that Kushina had been revealed to the public and had confirmed that Naruto was indeed her son, and by extension, an Uzumaki, she had publicly claimed ownership of the Uzumaki compound that had been placed under the Hokage's care after her supposed death. Hiruzen had kept the place in the best condition possible, wanting to give it to Naruto when he was older as the compound was his by blood. But now that Kushina was alive and well, he happily returned the ownership of the compound to her, relieved that Naruto would be able to share his home with family at such an early stage of his life. Naruto got out of bed and stretched his arms, listening to all of his bones pop. He made a beckoning motion with his hands, and all of his hearts shot out of their hiding places and leapt back into his back. He dragged his feet towards the door and opened it up to walk downstairs. He passed by his sister's door and noted that she was still sleeping based on the light snores that he heard. He trudged down the steps and entered the living room. It was a simple living room with 3 couches around a coffee table. There was a small shrine in the back of the room that Kushina had made for Minato. It had several pictures of the two surrounding a portrait similar to the one in the Hokage's office, even one of them with Naruto still in the womb, the closest thing they had to a family picture. There were flowers around the shrine with seals on them to keep them fresh for a long time. Naruto walked into the kitchen, the smell of a delicious breakfast making his stomach rumble loudly. Kushina smiled and turned around to see the half-awake Naruto. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," Kushina greeted. "Morning," Naruto mumbled as he trudged into his chair. He then proceeded to rest his head in his arms and fall back asleep. Kushina then grew an impish smile as she thought of an idea to keep him awake. "Oh well, guess there'll be more ramen for me then," she sighed dramatically, looking at Naruto out of the corner of her eye. Just as she planned, Naruto sprung up quickly, wide awake. "Ramen for breakfast? Where?" Kushina then slid a plate of pancakes in front of him and told him, "Sorry, maybe next time." Her grin only got wider as Naruto sent her a tired glare. He mumbled something incoherently as he stuffed a piece of pancake in his mouth. Several minutes later, Natsumi sleepily walked downstairs towards the kitchen. She was rubbing her eye with one hand and held a strange stuffed animal in another. It was a strange white being with a large red nose, horizontal slants for eyes, and an antennae with a large red ball on it. Naruto smiled at the sight, seeing that she was enjoying the gift that he had given her. Technically, it was a gift from one of the races that served a primal. They had insisted that he take it after he mentioned his sister. And with an idea from Tsunade, he was able to make it more than a regular stuffed animal. Jiraiya had shuddered when he saw what happened to the person who tried to bully Natsumi. He was sure that he would have nightmares for weeks. "Morning." Natsumi yawned as she sat in her chair, placing her stuffed animal in front of her. Kushina approached her with a plate of pancakes, causing her eyes to widen. Natsumi swiftly moved her plush out of the way to make room for her breakfast. She instantly began to devour them with gusto, practically cleaning the plate in 5 minutes, much to the astonishment of Naruto and Kushina. She held up her plate and asked, "More please." She said this with an innocent smile on her face. Kushina just nodded, still in shock, and went to get more for the growing girl. Naruto was shaken out of his shock by the rumbling laughter from within his mind. He internally looked back and saw Kurama rolling on the floor in laughter. "Wahahahaha. And here I was thinking she would have a ramen addiction like the rest of her family. Gahahahaha." Kurama roared. Naruto just huffed and left his mindscape, returning to reality to see his little sister inhaling more pancakes. Well, at least the mornings will be interesting, Naruto thought as he went back to eating his own breakfast. 30 minutes later. "So Sochi, are you ready for tonight?" Kushina asked Naruto with a wide grin on her face. It took Naruto a moment to process what she asked before his face became red with embarrassment. "Ka-chan." Naruto whined. "I'm already getting enough of this from Gigi and Hitomi-sama, I don't need more." "But Ni-chan, don't you want to go out with Hinata-ne-san?" Natsumi asked as she hugged her plushie. Naruto's mind then wandered back to the event that happened 2 days ago. Flashback 2 days ago. Naruto walked out of Ichiraku with a full stomach and a large smile on his face. He had broken his record once again, and had a delicious lunch as a bonus. He looked around and saw that everyone was working hard to rebuild the village and make improvements to buildings that were very old. He was wondering if he would be given the Chunin rank at the end of the week, when the Hokage had announced that they would be ready with the equipment for those who were promoted. "Naruto-kun." Said boy turned around just in time to see a blue-haired blur slam into him, nearly toppling him over. "Oof. What the dash?" Naruto paused as he looked down and saw that it was Hinata that slammed into him, her arms wrapped around him tightly. "You're awake," she cried. "When I didn't find you in your hospital room I was so worried." "Sorry about that," Naruto apologized, I tried to find you after I got out, but I had no idea where you were, and Hanabi-chan had no idea either. Ka-chan took me out to an old Hyuga shrine for the past day, she wanted to show me something, Hinata answered. She then realized that she was hugging Naruto, in the middle of the street, for all the people to see. Eep! She squeaked as she leapt back, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. Say Hinata, since we've got some time until Gigi announces who becomes a Chunin, and since we've got no work in the village right now. Naruto trailed off, his face growing a blush. Yes? Hinata asked. I was thinking about mumble, Naruto mumbled. Could you repeat that? Hinata asked. Naruto took a deep breath, slapped his cheeks, and said, I was thinking about taking you out on that date I promised you. Hinata gasped, shock and joy entering her mind. Shock and joy that Naruto was asking her out, the one thing she wanted for a very long time. Naruto asked me on a date. 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 Naruto took this the wrong way and quickly said, if you don't want to, that's okay, I'm not forcing you to come. What are you doing? Answer him before he changes his mind. I'd love to. Hinata blurted out, immediately clapping her hands over her mouth in embarrassment for how loud she was. I mean, I'd love to go on a date with you, Naruto-kun. Naruto's mood immediately lifted. Great. How about I take you out to dinner in 2 days? Yes, that'd be wonderful. Hinata agreed. Okay, see you later. Naruto waved goodbye as he ran home. Hinata numbly waved back as her mind went on autopilot, taking her home, where she fainted the moment she entered her room, a large smile on her face. Flashback end. Naruto shook his head and told Natsumi, of course I want to, she's practically the only girl my age who's been kind to me from the beginning. Then you should get ready, I've got an old Uzumaki kimono that I think will fit you perfectly, Kushina said. Ka-chan, I'm picking her up at 6:30. Naruto reminded her. You should still try on the kimono, just in case I need to make a few adjustments, Kushina told him. Naruto sighed and nodded in agreement, so Kushina took him by the arm and led him out of the kitchen, and upstairs to her room. Hyuga compound. Hinata was madly digging through her closet, tossing clothes to the side in search of something to wear for tonight. Hanabi was sitting on her bed, watching her make a mess in amusement. Hinata-sama, Hayashi-sama has reeked ga. Niji was cut off as a jacket was thrown into his face as soon as he entered the doorway. I'm busy. Hinata yelled, not paying attention to anything. Now Hinata-chan, Hitomi lightly scolded, though the grin on her face said she was amused, you should go and see what your father wants, Hanabi, and I will find something for you to wear. Hi Ka-chan, Hinata stuttered as she tried to calm herself down. She shakily walked out of her room and towards her father's office while Hitomi and Hanabi set to work finding something for her to wear. Hayashi was sitting in his office, patiently waiting for Hinata to arrive. Normally he would go through some more papers to kill time, but his mind was in another place. His firstborn was going on her first date, and he was trying to wrap his head around that fact. He was honestly surprised when Naruto arrived days ago to ask him for permission. Flashback, 3 days ago. Enter, Hayashi told whoever was at his door. He had no planned meetings at this time, so he had no idea who it was. He wasn't going to use his Byakugan to check anyway, as it was looked down upon to use the Byakugan outside of a spar in the compound, but that did not mean that it wasn't done now and then. The Hyuga Patriarch was surprised to see Naruto enter his office, having no idea what the young Uzumaki wanted. Naruto, this is an unexpected surprise, Hayashi greeted him. Greetings Hayashi-sama, I have come here today to make a request of you, Naruto greeted formally. Now Hiyasi's interest was piqued, it was very rare for Naruto to be formal. So this request he was making was obviously important to him. He idly wondered what it was, but could come up with only one thing. And what is this request? Naruto took a deep breath, obviously steeling himself, and told him, "I would like to take your daughter, Hinata, out on a date." Hayashi sighed internally, his suspicions confirmed. In all honesty, he knew that this day would come due to how close the two had gotten ever since they became friends all those years ago. Not to mention that his wife was constantly going on about how adorable they would look together. "And why should I allow this?" Hayashi asked him, leaning forward. "There are many other young men your age, some of them having more notability than you." "Because I know Hinata the best, as I've been her friend outside of your clan the longest," Naruto replied. "I know almost everything about her, what she likes, what she dislikes, and what her dreams are. And I'll work to make them come true." Impressive response, he's passed this first test, but let's see how he does with the next one, Hayashi thought, smirking internally. A very true point, but what about those who have more to offer than you? Hayashi asked again. "I want my daughter to have a bright future where she will be very happy. Like I told you before, I know Hinata better than anyone outside of your clan," Naruto stated once again. "That also means that I know that she doesn't care about money or fame, what she wants is to have is a caring family and make sure that her family is happy. You would be ruining her if you married her off to someone just because they're rich. But if you're really concerned about that, then the Uzumaki treasury will please you as we have a large amount of funds that have grown large ever since Ka-chan died. In all honesty, the thing about money is complete nonsense as I would assist her even if you were broke," Hayashi thought. "Nonetheless, the fact that your clan is large on funds is relieving." Hayashi sat there for several minutes, his eyes staring into Naruto. He could see how much he wanted to take Hinata out on this date, and how much he cared for her. The amount of care that he held for her was great, impressing the Hyuga leader. He could also see an amount of fear that Naruto had of him, which pleased him greatly. "I have decided," Hayashi began, "that I will allow you to take Hinata out on your date. Your points were solid, and you passed my little tests to see how much you care for her. You already know that I care for her a lot." Naruto shouted. "She's my best friend, my closest friend." "I know that, Naruto, believe me," Hayashi told him. "But you must understand that she is also my daughter, and it is a father's duty to make sure that their daughter will be happy throughout her life, even when I am not here anymore. But on the other hand, she is also the heiress of the clan, and that as the head of the clan, I need to make sure that our image is upheld throughout the village to keep all of our business running smoothly, and that clients stay with us. I will not lie to you, I would have hesitated to allow this if you had asked before the invasion, but now that your reputation is growing among the village, my fears are put at rest. Thank you Hayashi-sama, I'll make sure that Hinata is happy when we go out." Naruto thanked him as he bowed. Hayashi bowed as well. "Oh, I know that, but there are several rules that I want you to be aware of," Hayashi told him as he stood up and walked to the back of the room, picking up a sword that was mounted on the wall. Naruto gulped as he grew nervous, making Hayashi gain a large grin that he quickly hid. "First and foremost, I want my daughter to be returned to the compound at 9 o'clock. Any moment later will be met with appropriate punishment," Hayashi stated as he examined the sheathed sword in his hand. Naruto just stiffly nodded, keeping an eye on the older man's hands. "Secondly, you are to treat her with the utmost respect, and defend her from any ruffians who attempt to do her harm, be they meaning to attack either you or the Hyuga clan." This time, Naruto's fear vanished as he gave Hayashi a determined nod that surprised the man momentarily. He then smirked to himself and continued to examine the sword, his hand now on its hilt. "Thirdly, and most importantly, you are to refrain from any inappropriate actions with my daughter, otherwise." In a flash, Hayashi unsheathed the sword and aimed it at Naruto's nose. The young Jinchuriki yelped and froze up in fear. Even his threads were frozen stiff, not coming out to defend him. "Do we have an understanding?" Hayashi asked in an eerily calm tone. Naruto quickly nodded, trying to inch away from the sword. "Excellent, I am pleased to see that," Hayashi told him. "That is all, you may go now." Naruto didn't miss a beat and quickly activated his Mangekyo, using Kamui to quickly escape. Hayashi sheathed his sword and placed it back on the wall before continuing his work, a smug smirk on his face for the rest of the day. Flashback end. Hayashi grinned in amusement at the memory. Scaring Naruto had been entertaining indeed. He wished he could do it again. "To-sama, you called for me?" Hinata asked as she entered his office. "Yes, please take a seat," Hayashi requested. Hinata took a seat right in front of his desk. "I understand that you are going on an outing with your teammate." Hinata gained a slight blush as she responded, "Yes, To-sama. I'm going out with Naruto-kun tonight." Indeed, he had come to me several days ago to ask for my permission, which I had obviously given, Hayashi stated. "Now there are several things that I want you to be aware of when you go out." "Yes?" Hinata asked. "First and foremost, you are a young woman, and while I trust Naruto with your well-being, I am also aware that he is a young man himself. So be mindful of him and make sure that he behaves himself," Hayashi stated. "To-sama, Naruto-kun would never do something to harm me outside of a spar. Please have some more faith in him," Hinata pleaded. "Can you blame me for worrying over you?" Hayashi asked. "Secondly, you are the heiress of the Hyuga clan. Your actions will reflect on the clan, no matter what you do, so please make sure that both you and Naruto are on good behavior." Hinata nodded, already knowing this fact from when her mother spoke to her earlier. And finally, Hayashi began as he stood up and walked around his desk. He stood before Hinata and knelt down, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Enjoy yourself. You can only have one first date." Hinata gave her father a smile and replied, "I will To-sama." She gave him a hug before exiting his office. Later that evening, Naruto fidgeted nervously as he stood in the main room of the Hyuga compound. Hayashi and Niji were in the same room giving him stone-cold stares that would have reduced a normal man into a blubbering mess. The young Uzumaki was wearing a dark blue kimono with a black sash around his waist. The Uzumaki clan emblem was on the back, and he was wearing traditional open-toed sandals. Kushina had dug out the old kimono and had made the proper adjustments to fix it up and make it Naruto's size. Naruto gulped as the stares from the other two males intensified. The silence was broken by a giddy Kushina and a pleased Hitomi walking down the steps. "Oh, Naruto-kun," Kushina said in a happy tone, "you're going to enjoy tonight, I just know it." The young Uzumaki boy looked behind them and froze. Walking down the steps was Hinata Hyuga. She was wearing a pure white kimono with autumn leaf designs on the left side, and a sunny yellow obi wrapped around her waist. She wasn't wearing any makeup, as both Kushina and her mother told her that her natural beauty made it unneeded. She nervously walked down the stairs, blushing as she was Naruto staring at her with awe in his eyes, making her feel happy. She took in his appearance and thought that he looked even more handsome than usual. "Hinata-chan, you look amazing," Naruto blurted out. Hinata blushed furiously and hid her face behind her sleeves. "Told you," Hanabi told Kushina from behind her sister. The elder Uzumaki grumbled before handing the grinning girl a handful of coins. Hitomi giggled at their banter, not bothering to hide her amusement. "Shall we get going?" Naruto asked as he offered his data hand. Hinata nodded before reaching out to him, taking her hand in his. "Hold it!" Kushina shouted. "We need a picture of this." In a flash, she repositioned both of the children so that they were picture-ready. Naruto had his arm around Hinata, and the Hyuga heiress had her hands clasped in front of her, while a blush adorned her cheeks. "Smile!" Kushina took several pictures with a camera she brought just for this occasion. "Now, get going. You're burning daylight." She practically shoved the both of them out of the door and slammed it behind them. "Must you be so pushy?" Hayashi asked as he deadpanned at the immature woman. "I just don't want them to realize their feelings when it's too late," Kushina told the Hyuga head, reminding him of some of the tragedies of life. Konoha streets. The young couple walked through the brightly lit streets, gaining attention of several people, mostly females, who gushed over how adorable they looked together. Hinata blushed at the praise and tried to hide behind Naruto, but he encouraged her to stay at his side and take praise in the compliments, to which he agreed with under his breath. Where are we going, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked, having gained some more confidence along the way. Ka-chan helped me make a reservation at a nice restaurant yesterday, Naruto answered her, leading the way. They eventually came up upon a fancy-looking restaurant. In the windows, they could see several couples enjoying their own outings. Hinata's eyes bulged the moment she saw the sign hanging above. The royal leaf? She gasped in shock. Naruto-kun, how were you able to get a reservation here? You have to request 1 month in advance. Plus, it's really expensive. Naruto just gave her a grin and explained, well, back during the invasion, my newly acquired lightning and wind hearts rescued the owners of this place. Their daughter was at the stadium and told them about my Jiongu when they told her about their rescue. So when me and Ka-chan were looking for a restaurant, we ran into them and gave me this reservation as a way to say thank you. Though Ka-chan insisted on giving them money even though they offered it for free. Hinata just stared at him in shock before she shook herself back to reality. Naruto then led her inside the restaurant, where they were stopped by a maitre d' who had a small grin as he saw the blonde. Ah! The savior of the restaurant and his date. He greeted them warmly. I was told to expect you tonight, and I was not disappointed at all. Naruto just chuckled and rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. The maitre d' then took the couple to their table and left them with their menus. Naruto, having been trained by Kushina on how to be a gentleman, pulled out Hinata's chair for her and pushed it back towards the table after she had taken her seat before sitting down himself. So? Naruto trailed off as he tried to think of a conversation starter. How's things going with your family? It's fine, Hinata replied shyly, still nervous. Tucson managed to get things under control after the invasion. How's everything with your family? It's going great. Naruto beamed. It's really nice to live in a house with other people, especially family. Natsumi sometimes crawls into my bed at night for some reason, but Ka-chan told me that she just wants to grow closer with me. That's true, Hanabi-chan used to that too, especially whenever my parents were out on a date and would come home late, Hinata told him, her nervousness slowly evaporating. Good evening, Hyuga-sama, Uzumaki-sama, a waiter greeted as he approached them. I shall be your waiter this evening, may I take your order? I'll have katsu with curry rice, Naruto said after taking a look at his menu. And you, Hyuga-sama? Oh no, I'll have the katsudon, Hinata replied. The waiter thanked them and took their menus. Outside. Come on, Gaki, make a move already. Jiraiya whined as he spied on his godson from a building across the street. He was spying on Naruto's date for some writing ideas for his next book. The author of Ika Ika had hit a block in his writing and was searching for information. He's Minato's son, so he's obviously inherited Minato's skills with the ladies. Was Jiraiya's thoughts. Unfortunately for him, he didn't expect any interference tonight. And just what do you think you're doing? A voice asked behind him. Jiraiya froze, sweat pouring off of his head and his complexion turning pale. He shakily turned around and saw Kushina standing there with her arms crossed and her eyes narrowed. It didn't help that Tsunade was standing next to her, sending him a glare that just screamed at him to run. And then there was Hitomi, who wore a cold stony glare that would make Hayashi cringe in fear. Jiraiya babbled as he tried to find an excuse. I was just keeping an eye on them. Making sure that nobody would try in anything. Really? Tsunade asked with a sarcastic tone. Because I would believe you, if it wasn't for this. She held up his notebook, which was open to all of the notes that he had taken tonight, before it burst into flames in her hands. Now then, shall we commence with the proper punishment? Hitomi asked, her voice as cold as her expression. Wait. You can't do anything here. You'll attract all kinds of attention. Jiraiya shouted, hoping to stall them long enough to escape. Good thing I placed a privacy seal here, as well as a area binding seal to keep you from leaving, Kushina told him, shattering his hopes instantly. Jiraiya let out a girlish scream as the trio of women descended upon him. Unknown. An enormous figure paused as he raised his head, the plant life that was growing around his arms ceasing entirely. His red eyes narrowed as he tried to figure out what was happening. "What is it?" a figure asked as he appeared from the nearby forest, his pure white eyes observing the fellow giant as the neighing of a horse could be heard. "For a fleeting moment, I believed that I heard the cries of a man that was doomed to the fury of 3 scorned women, and then I heard only silence," the first figure answered. "'Tis of no concern of thee," the second one answered. "Our concern lies not with every mortal, only the ones associated with the young one. Now I must return, the shroud shall not guard itself." The second figure departed back into the forest, leaving the red-eyed being to continue to grow the plant life around him. The royal leaf. Naruto and Hinata had a wonderful dinner. They had exchanged interesting stories about their lives, and had a delicious meal as well. Everyone could tell how happy the young couple was, and that their positive mood was affecting everyone in the restaurant. Did he really do that? Hinata giggled as Naruto told her about Jiraiya's latest attempt at peeking at Tsunade while she was at the springs. "Yup," Naruto confirmed. "He got beat so bad that he was unconscious for 3 days." Both of the teens' laughter started anew at the ridiculous Toad Sonin. "Pardon me for interrupting," the waiter spoke up as he approached them, "but we have your bill." "Thank you," Naruto replied as he took the bill and took a look at it. He then proceeded to take out his wallet. "Naruto-kun, you don't have to pay," Hinata spoke up. "You're right, I don't have to," Naruto replied, "but I want to." "Isn't it the man's job to pay for a date?" he asked her with a grin. Hinata just blushed and looked away. After they had left the restaurant, they had noticed that it was nearly 9 o'clock, nearly time for Naruto to take Hinata home as per the rules Hayashi laid out for him. He thought of what to do before then, and then he got an idea. "Hey Hinata," Naruto called out, getting the young girl's attention. "Hi?" Hinata asked. "Hold on tight," Naruto told her with an impish grin. "What are yo EP?" Hinata squeaked as Naruto lifted her up bridal style and leapt on top of a nearby building. Hinata quickly wrapped her arms around his neck as to not fall off. "Naruto!" Hinata screamed as the young Jinchuriki flew from building to building. "Just relax." Naruto laughed. "It's not gonna be long till we get there." True to his words, he arrived at his destination and set Hinata down. He took a look at her and burst out laughing at her bewildered face, along with her hair which was sticking up all over the place. Hinata pouted and started banging her fists against his chest. "It's not funny. You nearly scared me to death." Naruto backed away, wiping the tears from his eyes. "Sorry, but if I didn't do that, then we wouldn't get here on time." "Get where?" Hinata asked as she smoothed out her hair. Naruto merely pointed behind her. She turned around and gasped at the sight that she beheld. The entire village of Konoha was laid out before her, lit up by the night lights. The whole village looked like the stars above, bright and beautiful. It was then that she realized where she actually was. "We're on the Hokage monument." Hinata gasped. "Yup. I used to come up here when I just wanted to be away from it all," Naruto told her. "This is my special place, so I wanted to share it with you." "Naruto-kun, it's wonderful," Hinata exclaimed as she gave him a tight hug, which Naruto returned. When they let go, Naruto walked over to the Yandamei's head and sat down. "I always felt more comfortable when I was sitting on top of the Yandamei's head," Naruto explained to her with a touch of sadness in his voice. "Now I know why." Hinata slowly walked towards him and sat down gently. "I know it's probably hard knowing that your father was the Hokage, and that he was the one who sealed the Kyuubi in you. But he did that because he loved you and wanted you to live, and that he had faith that you could bear the burden." "I know, Ka-chan explained it to me when I asked her about it," Naruto told her. "I still wonder what it'd be like if he was alive too. Though I'm afraid of the thought, I'm afraid that I'd turn out like Sasuke." "I don't think so," Hinata disagreed. "I think you'd be the same way you are now, just without the Jiongu and maybe without the primals." You really think so? Naruto asked. I know so, Hinata clarified. Naruto grinned and wrapped his arm around her. She blushed a bright red at the action, but snuggled close to him anyway. The two of them stayed there for a while, just watching the sight below them. Naruto-kun, Hinata spoke. Yes? Naruto asked. Thank you for being here with me, I had a lot of fun tonight, Hinata told him. Me too, we should do something like this again, Naruto told her. Yeah, Hinata agreed. And the two of them sat there as the night went on. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.